Forget about valor or courage. Today, wars are won by algorithms, programs that decide in seconds who survives and who burns. At 2:30 p.m. on June 8, 2025, a Ukrainian Vilkha-M battery was preparing to fire on a Russian ammunition depot codenamed Granite 12 on the outskirts of Pokrovsk. Suddenly, two passive receivers from the Ukrainian system lit up with alarms. The signature was unmistakable, the low electronic growl of a Russian Zoopark 1M counter battery radar, positioned 38 kilometers away. That could only mean one thing. They had been spotted. The Zoopark could track the trajectory of any shell and triangulate the launch site in less than 30 seconds. The Ukrainian gunners knew it well. Just 15 minutes earlier, they had fired a harassment salvo, and now the enemy was answering. Russian Tornado S systems were already preparing to strike. Each rocket could cover over 40 kilometers in just 2 minutes. They had 6 minutes to live before a storm of steel fell on their heads. The launcher had 4 Vilkha-M missiles loaded and aimed directly at Granite 12. 12 seconds later, the crew leader shouted, "Emergency procedure!" There was no time for the manual. The gunner grabbed his rugged Kropiva tablet. On the screen, a tactical map flashed red over the target. The protocol was clear. Input precise coordinates into the terminal, validate the route, and transmit it via encrypted link to the missile guidance system. Normally, a 3-minute process. They had 90 seconds. The Vilkha-M was no ordinary rocket. It was Ukraine's crown jewel. 800 kilograms, carrying a 170-kilo warhead of high explosive, enough to shatter reinforced concrete. Guided by GPS and GLONASS, it could strike from dozens of kilometers away with an error margin of just 10 to 30 meters. A cold, precise, lethal weapon. But loading coordinates under the gaze of a Russian radar wasn't procedure. It was suicide dressed up as protocol. At 2:32 p.m., the terminal's tone suddenly cut out. Russian jammers had killed the satellite signal. The gunner switched to manual. The coordinates entered a minute earlier were now their only hope. A 5-meter error could mean missing the target and dying for nothing. The thermal mast picked up a flash to the northeast. Heat plumes 32 kilometers out. A Tornado S rocket was already airborne. The loader slammed the armored hatch shut. Cold math followed. The incoming rockets would cover the distance in under a minute. The reloading system could prepare one missile every 20 seconds, but doctrine required 45 seconds between shots to avoid stressing the launcher. The crew chief cut the debate short. 30 seconds between each, no more. The first Vilkha-M roared skyward, the air trembling like a taut cable. Russian radars marked it instantly. The gunner was already calling for the second shot while the driver floored the 808 engine. The second missile screamed off, leaving a blazing thermal trail impossible to hide. Within seconds, the Zoopark 1M had triangulated their position within 50 meters. The rising electronic whine left no doubt. Tornado S incoming. Impact in 30 seconds. Then the third Vilkha-M erupted, shaking the armored hull. "One more and we're gone," the chief barked. The fourth missile launched just as a Tornado S slammed into the ground 400 meters away. The blast rocked the vehicle, peppering it with shrapnel. Another impact landed behind them, confirming the kill zone. "Move, move, move!" The 808 roared forward, tearing through the mud while Russian strikes obliterated the position they had abandoned seconds earlier. But it didn't matter anymore. 4 Vilkha-Ms were already slicing the air at 100 meters per second, locked on target Granite 12. Nothing could stop them. At 2:40 p.m., the first missile plunged from 6,000 meters straight into the edge of the Russian defenses. Its onboard computer was making 50 corrections per second as the sky filled with Russian electronic warfare trying to blind its GPS. The Vilkha switched to inertial navigation, its fiber-optic gyros keeping it on course like an arrow. Meanwhile, 28 kilometers away, a Russian Tor-M2 air defense battery powered up its radar. Inside the cabin, the operator heard the heavy hum of the antenna as a single dot appeared, descending at over 1,000 meters per second. Target locked. The hum turned into a sharp, continuous tone. The commander gave the only possible order: fire. 2 9-38K interceptors leapt vertically, wrapped in clouds of smoke. In 2 seconds, they were at Mach 2.6, banking toward the calculated interception point. But the Ukrainian missile wasn't a docile target. It shifted 15 degrees left, continuing its dive. A tiny correction, enough to throw it off the first interception point and force the Tor's computer to recalculate. The deadly chess match had just begun. The Vilkha-M missile had just bought itself an extra 300 meters, and in doing so, ruined the Tor-M2's firing solution. The Russian air defense system roared to life like a beast awakened. On the radar screen, the echo of the incoming Vilkha dropped fast. The high-pitched tone of the radar was relentless, drilling into the operator's ears. Fire. 2 more interceptors shot upward, leaving behind thunderclaps and thick white vapor. Within seconds, they were hypersonic, bending into a deadly intercept curve. For a brief moment, it seemed certain. The Tor was built for this. Fast, precise, lethal targets. One shot, one kill. But the Ukrainian missile refused to fly straight. Mid-descent, it jerked hard, 15 degrees left, like it could read the operator's mind. The radar screamed again. The fire control computer demanded a recalculation. The operator cursed, reacquired the target, sweat dripping down his forehead, hands trembling over the console. Then the Vilkha broke again, this time 20 degrees right, diving harder. A tiny adjustment in the sky, but enough to tear apart the math. The Tor's first interceptors missed. Manual tracking kicked in. On the screen, the Vilkha-M plunged through 3,000 meters, less than a minute to impact. 2 more interceptors launched. To the east, a Pantsir S-1 radar lit up, joining the hunt. Missiles streaked upward, guns hammered, but none connected. Shrapnel raked the Vilkha's skin, peeling away metal, sparking under the stress. For a second, it looked like the missile might break apart. It didn't. The onboard computer corrected, locked back on course, and kept diving like a predator that couldn't be stopped. Then, another blip. A second Vilkha-M entered radar range, trailing 30 seconds behind. 2 missiles now. One system couldn't handle both. The Pantsir tried again, but the lead missile had already slipped into its blind angle. The turret spun, but too late. At 8 kilometers from the target, the first Vilkha entered terminal phase. 4 Russian systems locked onto it at once: Tor M2, Pantsir, Buk M2, and the optical sensors guarding the depot known as Granite 12. Circles of radar light overlapped on a single burning dot. 45 seconds to impact. All or nothing. Months of intelligence work, or another failure in the dirt. The Tor operator had one last chance. The missile skimmed the ridgeline, hugging terrain at 400 meters altitude. In 15 seconds, it would break over the crest and dive. The interceptors were pre-programmed for that exact spot. The operator held his breath and waited. South of the ridge, another Pantsir scrambled to line up a shot. Its 12 missiles were ready, but its radar couldn't lock. The last hope was an aging ZSU-23 Shilka, 4 23mm cannons capable of spitting 3,000 rounds per minute. The gunner aimed along the predicted flight path, pulse racing. He knew he'd get 3 seconds, no more. The Tor's radar screamed constant tone. The Vilkha crested the hill, diving hard. Launch! 2 interceptors blasted from the tubes, their engines tearing the sky. 6 contrails streaked upward in total, split between 2 Ukrainian missiles. Probability of success dropped. The lead Vilkha dropped through 200 meters. Its proximity fuse armed. The radar altimeter whispered the final numbers. On the ground, Russian soldiers sprinted between stacks of rockets, forklifts still running. 30 seconds wasn't enough to move thousands of tons of ammunition. The Tor's interceptors missed by 30 meters, warheads exploding behind the Ukrainian missile, defeated by sheer speed and angle. The Vilkha didn't flinch. At 600 meters, the Shilka opened fire. The turret shook violently as streams of tracers cut the sky. In 2.5 seconds, nearly 200 shells slammed into the air, ricocheting sparks off steel. It wasn't enough. Seconds later, a third Vilkha entered the battle space. Panic alarms wailed at Granite 12. Forklifts sat abandoned among pallets of 122mm rockets. Men ran toward bunkers that wouldn't save them. The first missile armed its warhead. Impact fuse set. And then, silence. A breath, a thunderclap. 170 kilograms of high explosive ripped through the eastern wall of the depot. The pressure wave folded steel beams like paper, ripped doors from hinges, and punched through corridors like a hurricane of fire. Inside, thousands of tons of ammunition waited. At 1450 hours, the first Vilkha's blast triggered stacks of 152mm shells. A chain reaction. Flames leapt to 3,000 degrees. The second Vilkha slammed into the northern warehouse, detonating among Grad rockets. 6 exploded instantly, the shockwave tossing a 15-ton concrete roof slab into the air like cardboard. The third missile hit the western depot, igniting clusters of cluster munitions. Hollow detonations cascaded into bone-snapping cracks. Then, the S-300 stored nearby lit up. 133 kilograms of high explosive per missile, plus solid fuel motors. A wall of firestorm. Doors blown off. Vehicles overturned. Glass shattered for miles. The fourth Vilkha dove into a landscape that no longer existed. The depot was gone, replaced by a molten crater and thousands of rockets cooking off like fireworks. The blast shook the ground for kilometers. Civilians filmed mushroom clouds with trembling hands. The shockwave hit seconds later, hammering chests like a steel door slamming shut. Where warehouses once stood, only 4 infernos burned. Estimates spoke of 3,000 tons of munitions erased in half an hour. Strategically, that meant 3 weeks of Russian artillery fire gone. Orders soon came: scatter the surviving stockpiles, hide them across multiple sites. Less efficient, more vulnerable. Exactly the plan. The Ukrainian crews had survived counter-battery fire and one of the fiercest air defense networks in the theater. It wasn't luck. It was seconds stolen from the clock, pre-programmed evasive maneuvers, and the will not to look back. In less than 30 minutes, one set of coordinates had been turned into a strategic earthquake, and as the smoke drew maps across the sky, one truth became impossible to ignore. In this war, it doesn't matter how many munitions you stockpile. One well-guided missile can reduce years of arsenal to ash.